Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. On Friday, June 14th, 2018, I was finishing up a long workout. I went on a 7-mile hike and performed some heavy lifting. I felt a sudden crack in my right upper neck with a minor ache towards the base of my skull on the left during my last set of dumbbell curls. And immediately, I put the weights down and tried to stretch it out as it felt like a pulled muscle. Nothing seemed to help, so I took some Tylenol and decided to take it easy for the next few days. However, the agony increased hour by hour, and on Father's Day, June 16th, I awoke with even greater discomfort and informed my wife that we needed to go to urgent care to check if there was anything more serious than a strained muscle. We had intended to have a good time that day, and I was excited to spend my first Father's Day with my daughter, but I believed we'd do our scheduled activities afterward. As my wife prepared to go and I was downstairs with the baby, I took my blood pressure because the discomfort was growing worse, and it was pretty high, 180/90 or so. I wasn't particularly nervous or afraid at this point, but I was concerned. After about 10 minutes, my vision began to blur, and the pain seemed like a gorilla had jumped from a skyscraper and was beating me in the head with each heartbeat. I called my wife downstairs, grabbed out my phone, and instructed her to call 911 as my voice slurred and I collapsed on the floor. My vision faded out. The agony was excruciating. I'd never experienced pain like that before, and it seemed like my head exploded before my vision went dark. At this point, I felt as if I had died or was on the verge of dying for the first time in my life. As I was ready for what was to come, a sense of calm washed over me, and I heard a voice say, "Everything is going to be all right. Just cool out." Not in my voice, but in the voice of an older man or a flowered child from the 1960s. To put it another way, a hippie. I couldn't tell who was speaking or if I'd ever heard that voice before, but it sounded familiar and reassuring. I felt connected to it and to everything around me, and as I let go of my surroundings, it seemed like a piece of my ego died. And everything that was happening and had happened up to that moment in my entire life made perfect sense to me. Then, for a split second, the pain ended, and I was back in my own body, aware of what was going on around me. I'm not sure how long I was out. It may have been seconds or days. My feelings were horrible and the worst pain I'd ever had before collapsing, with complete clarity during and lasting clarity after. I was also upset that it was disregarded as a panic attack and that I couldn't see a doctor for weeks or months after going to the ER. I came across a distinct person or a voice that was plainly of mystical or unearthly origin. I heard a voice telling me that everything would be fine, that this was just a minor portion of my life, and that I should simply relax. It came at me without a sound, more like an instant psychic conversation. It seemed as if the past and future had vanished. It reminded me of one of those stereotyped hippies on TV, such as Cheech and Chong, but it was more loving, more knowledgeable, and truly full of peace and love. The pain returned after a brief respite, but it was more manageable, even if it was still intense, as if I could simply ignore it. I couldn't move, and my voice was slurred. But I had perfect clarity of thinking and was able to direct my wife over the phone on what to say, and then had her call a few friends and family members to come over, because I knew I was going to the hospital and didn't want her to be alone. I was able to check myself for stroke symptoms and did not appear to believe that was the case, because my paralysis was on both sides of my body and my face was not sagging. Despite the agony and inability to move and convey my ideas through my tongue, I was more alert and clear-headed than I'd ever been in my life. In fact, I remained calm throughout and did not feel in any danger. They were able to sit me up once the ambulance arrived, and my body began to spasm and shake violently. After about 10 to 15 minutes, I was able to stand and walk to the ambulance with assistance. I was paralyzed again in the ambulance and again in the hospital. I wasn't terrified, but rather grateful and relieved that I was still alive. The doctor who saw me first assumed I was having a panic attack, but he nevertheless ordered an MRI and CT scan, both of which came out clear. I was released shortly after and had to be helped to my car before being driven home. For the next 2 weeks, I felt as though I wasn't quite back to normal or used to my body. Going down the stairs required a lot of thought and the use of handrails, and I developed a stutter during and after that would return if there was too much information entering my head, as if it was short-circuiting. It also took some effort to walk without tripping on some days. I definitely shouldn't have been driving, and I ended up running a couple of stop signs and a red light a few weeks later, so I had my wife drive until I felt ready to resume driving. After 2 weeks, I was allowed to see my normal doctor, but I still experienced lasting symptoms such as stuttering and walking difficulties. It took forever to get in to see them. They immediately referred me to a neurologist who took 6 months to see me, by which time I had recovered totally from whatever had happened and was diagnosed with a complicated migraine causing catatonia. But in that small moment of lying on the floor, my entire attitude on life altered, and I believe it was for the better. Prior to the incident, my life seemed to be on autopilot, and while I was happy, I was simply going through the motions and not living with purpose. Now, I'm more concerned with making relationships with others and being the best version of myself possible so that I can better care for those around me. I told my therapist, who is using CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, to help me with my sleeplessness, and also my sister about it. They were both incredibly encouraging and provided some of their own experiences, my sister, as well as books to read about the mind and near-death experiences, my therapist. I haven't told my wife yet, but I don't see why I should. It was a painful experience for her, and she's still concerned about my general health. We communicated about everything else in our life, and shortly after, prepared a trust or will for our daughter. This event has also assisted me in unearthing aspects of my past that I'd been burying and was unwilling to interact with or discuss. Specifically, my self-doubt and imposter syndrome behavior has resulted in unpleasant thoughts and emotions. This, I believe, originates primarily from my childhood and my attempt to be someone other than myself in order to please my parents. My dreams, when I have them, are also a lot more vivid, and I can generally remember them pretty well. I also have lucid dreams on occasion. Whatever occurred to me in that brief moment when I heard that voice and collapsed on the ground felt more genuine than anything else I'd experienced before, and I'm not terrified of death or what comes after. I also try to enjoy my alone time by discovering new hobbies and ways to travel the globe.